Welcome. My name is Alex Flood. I'm a radiographer and a healthcare educator. Um, Currently, I teach two different programs. I teach clinical medical assisting as well as a limited permit X-ray technician program in the state of California. Um, this video is here. I'm doing this video to talk about sources of radiation so that I can help my X-ray tech students better understand the concepts of radiation safety. So let's go ahead and dive into this. So the first thing to know is that, we are exposed to radiation all the time. We're literally bathed in radiation from the time we're conceived all the way, through death. Um, Radiation comes in two forms. You have natural background radiation, and then you have man-made radiation. The type of radiation we're talking about here, and again, it's not just, we're not talking about the idea that energy radiates. We're talking about things like electromagnetic radiation and particulate radiation, which I'll discuss in just a little bit. To two broad sources of this type of radiation, you have the natural background. This comes from either the sun, stars, and space, cosmic radiation, or from within the Earth or within our own bodies. We call these terrestrial or internal sources. Category B, man-made sources, primarily come from medical applications. The majority of your man-made radiation exposure comes from medical applications. As well, you have man-made background radiation like consumer products, technologies, waste products, building materials, all are sources of radiation. This is a report from a city which talks about radioactive elements in their water. City drinking water quality report showing radioactive contaminants. There's alpha radiation and beta and photon emission in the drinking water in this city's water report. So you have radioactive elements in your drinking water, in your own body, right? They are all over. Some dose levels to be familiar with. These are annual natural background doses. The unit is in microgray, which is a unit of absorbed radiation dose. We receive approximately 300 microgray per year from cosmic radiation, more at higher altitudes. So at higher altitudes, you have less atmosphere above you and you're exposed to more. For example, if you live in Denver, Colorado, add 700 microgray per year than if you lived at sea level. If you are a flight attendant or a pilot, okay, you are going to be receiving approximately 1700 microgray per year. These levels are not high, by the way, even though I'm making it sound like they are. These levels are not high. These are small. 300 microgray from terrestrial stuff, mountains. Areas with high quartz contents are going to be more radioactive. Mountains will be higher dose levels. The soil in India, for example, extremely high, 40,000 microgray per year. You get approximately 400 microgray from your own body. A good example of radioactivity from your own body is potassium-40, the radioactive element found in bananas. Altogether, we have approximately 1,000 microgray, or said in another unit, 1 milligray per year, roughly. And that's, of course, natural background. So where's this radiation coming from? Okay, or well, what are at least on at a terrestrial level, where's it coming from? Well, one of the primary sources of terrestrial radiation is this stuff called radon gas. It's a natural byproduct of the decay of uranium, and it tends to build up in basements. So, areas where there's housing that commonly has basements, in their building code, they have to take into account that this gas can accumulate and actually become dangerous. And so These basements have to have proper ventilation. It can reach dangerous exposure levels of 1 to 2 milligray per year if not ventilated properly. This is a map released by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, showing deposits of granite, uranium, shale, and phosphate. The areas that are black are in the highest concentration. So I'm here in California, and you'll notice in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, the black area showing a high deposits of radioactive soil. This graph shows the levels of radon gas in grayscale, high being the dark gray and low being the light gray, and shows you the dispersion of radon gas in the soil. Again, radon gas is associated with uranium. This map shows you gamma radiation. Gamma radiation is it's a form of terrestrial radiation. This is at 1 meter, measured at 1 meter above ground level, the red areas being the highest, the purple and blue areas being the lowest. So you see a large concentration in the Midwest and Western United States, or the Northern United States and Western United States. You see a large concentration of the reds indicating high gamma exposure. This sort of tries to round everything out. Okay, we have cosmic radiation at about 300 microgray per year, terrestrial radiation at about 300 microgray per year, internal radiation at about 400 gray per year, and radon gas between 1 and 2 milligray per year, for a total of about 2 to 3 milligray of radiation exposure per year from natural background sources. So now we get to man-made radiation. These are primarily due to medical applications. Think dental x-rays, diagnostic radiographs, computed tomography, nuclear medicine, radiation therapy, which is going to give you some of the highest doses, bone densitometry, as well as any that I might be forgetting. We average about 3.2 microgray or 3.2 milligray or 3,200 microgray per year on average, and it constitutes about 75% of all of the man-made sources. So again, most of the man-made radiation is coming from medicine. Nearly 1/3 of the entire population in the United States gets a medical x-ray procedure done each year, so that's 30% of you. Other things include other man-made sources that are not medical, include building materials, technologies, like power plants, for example. Cigarettes are a great example. Okay? They contain radioactive elements called polonium-210 and lead-210. 22% of it goes into the smoke. Some of it stays in the butt, some of it stays in the filter, half of it stays in the ash, but 22% of it goes into the smoke. About a fifth of it, roughly even a quarter of it, goes into the smoke. 15% of smoke is inhaled. All of that you inhale stays in, this is what's so important to understand, stays in your lungs permanently. It does not leave and is not filtered out. The radioactive elements go and they continue to radiate once they're in your lungs. To know how long they're effective for, you'd need to know the half-lives of polonium-210 and lead-210. You need to know the radioactivity rate as well as the half-life. Other man-made background sources include things like nuclear warfare, the fallout from nuclear bomb tests, materials like strontium-90. Hiroshima is our greatest example, greatest as in the one that gave us the most information, definitely an absolute tragedy. However, it gave us a lot of information about how populations respond to radiation. Now, at that Hiroshima and Nagasaki incidents, those two separate incidences, at least with the Hiroshima incidents, 40,000 people were instantly vaporized due to the blast. About 100,000 people that were outside of the blast zone or survived the blast died within several days from ARS, acute radiation syndrome. Another 100,000 died within 5 years from radiation poisoning. We haven't used any of these modern hydrogen bombs, but they are roughly 1,000 times or more powerful than the atomic bomb. So hopefully we never have to see that happen. The last man-made sources to talk about are all the little sources of radiation. TVs, 10 to 20 microgray per year. The gloss on your magazines contains uranium and potassium. Bananas contain potassium. Houses contain potassium, uranium, thorium. Jewelries that have enamel, those contain uranium. Fertilizers contain potassium. Smoke detectors are radioactive. If you live near power plants, you get radiation. Here's what's a neat thing that I noticed as I was learning this information. You get more radiation exposure near a coal-fired power plant than you get near a nuclear power plant. Approximately 3 times more radiation than the nuclear power plant. So all of the scare about nuclear power plants is largely overblown due to the minor disaster that occurred in the 70s in the United States. The summary. The takeaway is that we're exposed to about 5.6 to 6.6 milligray per year through all of the different sources: natural background, radon gas, man-made background, medical radiation, and other man-made sources. This is a pie chart. The pie chart's useful in noticing who's the biggest offender, right? The biggest offender here is medical radiation, accounting for 51% of all the radiation that anyone receives. And guess who has control of the medical radiation dose? It's the radiographers. So, as a radiographer, you have a responsibility to your patients to minimize the radiation dose that they receive, simply because you have the primary control on the radiation doses that your patients receive in a year. You control the medical radiation dose, which is half of all the radiation people receive. In any case, I hope you learned something about the sources of radiation. Please check back next time